Okay, expenditures. We are moving on to expenditures. Just a word of warning before you get started with this step in the TFS, please do two things. One, review the TFS instructions that pertain to expenditures. And secondly, download and review the ESSA per pupil expenditure reporting guide. That is on the school finance page. If you go to the subject area tab for ESSA per pupil, look under the guidance and documents, it will be there, the ESSA per pupil expenditure reporting. Please download that document because it has important information that you will need for completing expenditures in the TFS. Okay, so now that we have those documents ready and you've reviewed them, let's go to TFS, Step 7, expenditures. As with revenues, you have two options. You also have, you can do the manual entry or you can do upload. And please remember that it works the same way as it does for revenues. So if you have a single fund selected, it will write or overwrite just for that fund. If you have all funds selected or no single fund selected, it will write everything. So make sure that you're really careful about what you have selected so that you don't overwrite data that you previously entered. Okay, so again, the same location for the upload template and instructions. It's under the accounting tab and other accounting resources. So the accounting area, and then you have the upload instructions and the upload template. Please be advised that the template must be in CSV format. So if you're using Excel, make sure when you do the save as, you do the type, and it should be in comma separated value format. It won't upload unless you're in that format. And it will also not upload unless you are free of errors. So if you have one error in your upload format, it won't upload unless you get rid of all the errors first. Here's an example. It shows you at the bottom in blue text that you have an error in that upload file. You need to open your file back up and take a look and find that error and fix it before it will allow you to upload. So it's not going to upload everything else. It's going to upload absolutely nothing until it's completely free of errors. So be aware of that. And it works exactly the same way with revenues. So remember that as well. All of them work the exact same way. A couple of things with expenditures, it gets a little bit confusing because we have the ESSA per pupil requirements in here. You need to be aware of how you can view expenditures. We get these questions all the time because a certain expenditure may not be listed on your expenditures page. If you have no school code selected, you will be able to see all of the school code expenditures. So you'll be able to see things that were not assigned to a school code and things that were assigned to a school code. But if you don't have a school code selected, you're only going to be able to edit records that do not have an assigned school code. If you want to edit records that have an assigned school code, you must select that school code. Be advised that when you select that school code, all the other expenditures will not show. So if you have school code 1 selected, you're only going to see expenditures for school code 1. If you have school code 2, you're only going to see school code 2. If you toggle off of the school code where you have no school code entered, you're going to see things that were not assigned a school code, as well as school code 1 and 2. So that's just an important consideration when you're looking for expenditures, just knowing how to view them and edit them individually. Okay, so the question we get all the time is, what do I report by school code? What do I have to report by school code? And the answer is anything that's required to be reported by school code. So how do you find that out? The guide that you would have reviewed initially has an appendix A. So you want to look and see whether the string you are uploading or entering is included in the ESSA per pupil calculation. So you're going to look at first the fund. Is the fund included? If that's yes, then you move to the program. Is the program included? And if that's yes, you look next at the function code. Is the function code included? If that's yes, then you look at the object code. If any of those are no along the way, it's not going to be included in the per pupil calculation, and it will not be necessary to include the school code. Okay, so the next thing is if you get a yes on all of them and it is an included school code, you look next at whether the expenditure string needs to be reported by school code or if it's district wide. So anything in the function code that says school level, you need to report that with a school code wherever possible. Now, sometimes it may not make sense to report something with the school code. And if it doesn't make sense to report it with the school code, then don't. So for example, if you're reporting teacher salaries, you're going to want to report those with a school code, and you're going to divide that in there by how you reported them in your team's report. So you're going to divide that FTE. So if you have a teacher, for example, that is 0.5 FTE at the elementary and 0.5 at the middle school, you're going to use that 0.5 to divide that teacher salary.
Previous question.
Yes.
Diane from YAC wants to know, will we need to use school codes if we are a standalone K through 8 district?
Okay, so that is the next consideration is if you are a district or an LE, a legal entity with more than one school code, you will be required to complete ESSA per pupil reporting. So if you're a K-12 district with 3 school codes, you have to report by school code. If you are an elementary district with a separate elementary and a separate middle school or 7-8, you are required to report by school code. If you are a standalone elementary with only one school code, you are not required to report by school code because you only have one school code. So everything's automatically assigned. The same with independent high school districts. So if you're a separate high school legal entity and you only have one school code, you also do not have to report by school code. Okay. Some other things here to note. So for example, if you're buying supplies, a 6XX object code, and you're buying paper for a K-12 district, we're not going to ask that you count every single piece of paper that's used by a school code. In that case, it would make sense to leave that district wide. But if you buy a set of textbooks for your first graders, you're going to want to report that directly to the school code. So there may be some instances where it makes sense to assign an expenditure string to a school code. And there are some instances where an expenditure string, even if it's the same one, does not make sense to assign by school code. So again, the question is where possible, assign a school code. You want to assign as many expenditures to a school code as you can, but please don't just download all of your expenditures and divide by a percentage or an enrollment. Only do it where it makes sense. Okay. All right, so project reporter codes, which expenditures require them? We talked a little bit about this already. So if you're making expenditures from the miscellaneous programs fund, all right, miscellaneous programs fund expenditures, any school safety and security transfers to or from the building reserve fund, and transformational learning transfers. All 3 of those require a project reporter code. Okay, a couple of things to note. You have on-screen toggles on your expenditure screen, so you can go back and forth between different things. There's a print expenditure report. that you can print. That is your schedule of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. This will be the identical report that is also available on the same area in step 6 revenues. There's a validation report toggle. These are all validations. It is not limited to either expenditures or the fund that you have selected. You have go-to buttons. These are quick tools to take you to different steps in the TFS so that you don't have to go back to the top and go, you know, data entry, TFS, step, whatever. These will automatically take you to those steps. There are some buttons here for per pupil expenditure report entries. We'll talk a little bit about more of these reports in a few minutes, but there are toggles right here on these screens if you want to verify your ESSA per pupil directly from here. Okay, we're going to talk about something brand new. So if I have put you to sleep already, this is a good time to kind of pay attention. We've added a new step to the TFS. This is step 7A, and it is meant to be to go with the expenditures. So what it is, it's a verification tool that you can use for ESSA per pupil expenditure reporting. So if you go under the TFS, under step 7, you're going to see this new step 7A. You'll see that you'll have the option to select whatever LEs that you have access to. And there are 3 reports that are under this verification. There is nothing to submit or save on this screen. These are simply 3 reports that you have available for you to help you verify your ESSA per pupil expenditure reporting. This is really important that you verify your ESSA per pupil expenditures. We had some confusion about when the ESSA per pupil expenditure reporting is due. This is a part of the TFS. It is not a separate data collection, and it should be done and reviewed as part of your TFS report. So this needs to be completed with your TFS. It follows the same change requirements as any other TFS change. We will accept minor corrections through December 10th, but you need to verify this as part of your original TFS submission. So the first report is actually 2 separate tabs. So there's a first tab and a second tab, so make sure you review both of them. The first one is an expenditure tab. So this will list all of the expenditure strings that you have not reported to a school code. The second tab is expenditures assigned, and it will show you all the expenditures that you have assigned to a school code. So on the first one, on the expenditures tab, I've just listed here some of the columns and what they mean. So you'll see things like LE enrollment and SC enrollment. This is not your A and B and should not be associated with A and B. This is actually the enrollment that we use to calculate per pupil expenditure. So please note that that may be a different number than your A and B. We have an unprorated amount. So this is the total amount of the expenditure string. There's a prorate field that is a ratio of your LE enrollment to SC enrollment. So if you have 1,000 in total enrollment and each of your SCs has 500 students, you're going to see a 0.5 in that prorate amount. Then we have a district-wide and a school-wide prorated amount. So if you have an expenditure string that is included in the ESSA per pupil reporting, it's going to go into either the district-wide or the school-wide column based on that function code. So remember, look at that Appendix B from that ESSA per pupil guide. That will show you where that expenditure string will fall. Okay. The not included prorate amount is the amount that is not included. So at some point in Appendix A, where you were looking at fund, program, function, and object, it said no. So it would not be included in your total ESSA per pupil. Okay, the second tab is a little bit more complicated, so you may want to refer back to this slide at some point.
We do have a question out here.
Yes.
If we are not using school codes, how do we do this step?
So if you are one of those lucky few districts that does not have to report by school code because you are already reporting by school code, because you only have one, you can skip report number 1 because you're not assigning things by school code. You will want to look at report number 2 and report number 3, and I'll talk about those in just a second, but this report number 1 will not be important if you are a standalone school district with one school. Okay, so for the second tab, this is the expenditures assigned tab. We're asking you to sort this in a particular way to make it more useful for you. So you would want to sort this report by fund, then program, then function, then object, and PRC. And what that will do is it will group all of your expenditures by school code. So we'll take a look at this again up at the top on in Excel. You can click the sort and then the review and then the sort. So it looks like this. Okay. If you have questions about how to sort this, certainly let me know. And I'd be happy to help you with this.
To do a custom sort.
Yes, this is a custom sort. Yep, I just. Okay. So when you do this sort, this is what's going to happen. You're going to have all of your same expenditure strings grouped together. So in this example, you can see we have the teacher salary expenditure string, and we can see exactly how much was allocated to one school and how much was allocated to the second. So you want to take a look at this, and what's important to on this screen is noting the split. So how accurate is this split? So if you were to take a look at this and you were to see that, for example, 200,000 was allocated to the elementary and maybe 2,000 was allocated to the middle school, you would know that there was a problem with your split. So you could go back into your expenditures under step 7 and you could correct your allocation. Okay, it's a little bit complicated, but these are some tools you can use to make sure this information is correct. Okay, the second report that we have out here, and this can be used even by school districts who do not have to report by school code, who have a single legal entity or a single school code under their legal entity. And this would be expenditures assigned to LE. So if you had, for example, you were sharing a food service fund, so you were a unified school district with a separate elementary legal entity with 2 school codes, and you were unified with a high school with 1 school code. The high school does not have to report by school code because it's only 1 school code in the legal entity. But if they're sharing a food service fund with the elementary, there may be expenditures that have been assigned to them. So this report, again, shows you everything that's been assigned to you by another legal entity. All right, so again, report number 2, expenditures from another legal entity. Some important fields here, you're going to have an LE name. That is your district. The LE from name is the legal entity that assigned the expenditure to you. And then you're going to have, again, LESC enrollment, but that only appears if an expenditure is prorated. So I'll explain that a little bit more in a second. There's a prorate field. Again, it works the same as in the other. It just is based on the school code's percentage of total enrollment. There's a district and school-wide prorated amount. Again, what goes in district-wide and school-wide is determined by the function code that you'll find in Appendix B of the ESSA per pupil reporting guide. And there are two different numbers or two different values that you'll see in the record source field. 1582.2 means that no school code has been assigned, and 1582 assigned means a school code has been assigned. So for example, in the school food fund, if the district that's operating the school food fund goes into step 9 and says $100 goes to school A, $100 goes to school B, that record is going to be 1582 assigned. If they just go in and say $200 to legal entity B, it's going to show up in that 1582 field, meaning that there is no school code assigned. Okay. So report number 3. Report number 3 is going to be, let's see, that slide is incorrect. So we'll fix this slide. So report number 3 is going to be expenditures from a cooperative. These are special education cooperatives that have assigned expenditures to a legal entity. So click on report number 3. Note that this report only applies to legal entities who are members of a special education cooperative. So if you're not a member of a special education cooperative and you run this report, it will be blank. The other important note here is that cooperative expenditures are prorated based on enrollment in that legal entity compared to total enrollment in the cooperative. So there's no school code issues at this point for cooperatives. It's simply assigned to the legal entity. And as with every other report, whether it goes in the district-wide or the school-wide or the not included column, all depends on Appendix A and Appendix B in that ESSA per pupil guide. So that logic is exactly the same. All right, everybody, thank you very much for the 5-minute stretch. We have a couple of questions that we'll go back and answer. The first one that was put into the parking lot, changing the board of trustee name on your cover sheet. If there is any incorrect information on your cover sheet, please email the OPI School Finance, or you can email Jesse Romero directly, and we will help you get those corrections made. So that's the easiest way to get those corrections done. So just let us know and we'll do what we can to help you out with that. Okay, there's 2 other chats. 2 other chat questions that we have pertaining to step 7A. As a cooperative, do you have to do step 7A? And the answer is no, because we do not report cooperatives for ESSA per pupil expenditure reporting. That is only for school districts. The second question, will Cabinet Mountain report all funds we send to them, or do we report this? So the way that it works is that a cooperative is required to enter TFS information. We do not take that information by school code. We simply take the aggregate of the information entered and divide that by the total enrollment in the cooperative. So even if a school code is assigned, our system ignores that and divides all of the expenditures of the cooperative by the enrollment in the cooperative. So everything's prorated by
With that, we will go ahead and get into the presentation. We're going to go back to TFS for just a second this morning. Nicole's going to do a couple of follow-ups of some information that she has gotten from districts or questions that she has gotten from districts to try to give a little bit of clarification. And then from there, we are going to be moving straight into the budget part of the presentation today. Nicole? Oh, we should say also, we will be starting today on slide 139, it looks like.
So good morning, everybody. I just wanted to talk about a quick issue that has come up with several districts regarding the TFS. So I'm going to give you an example here of the issue. So if you have a permissive building reserve levy that is filled with both district tax levy and state major maintenance aid, as you can see here on the left side of the screen in the 2022 budget, you could see that the district tax levy necessary is $17,627.12, and it's filled with the remainder of state major maintenance aid, $3,172.88. If you look at the screen on the right, this is the TFS for 22 that you're completing now. And in this example, the district received $21,000 in tax levy. So they enter the tax levy as $21,000 into the permissive building reserve fund. However, this district then gets an error on the validation saying that the tax revenue in the building reserve fund exceeds the amount necessary for the state major maintenance aid. What the problem is with this is that the district needs to enter a portion of this tax revenue as prior year taxes. So if you get a lump sum from your district or from your county, you need to make sure what of that is actually prior year taxes. So in this case, if they were to go in and they were to change this number to 17,000 for current year taxes, and then put in the prior year taxes for the remainder, so that would be the 4,000 to equal 21,000, that validation would then go away. So that is a really good demonstration of how to put in the district tax levy so that you have both the current year taxes, which are the revenue codes 110 through 116, and then you have the prior year taxes, which are the 117. And you should be entering current year and prior year taxes in any fund that requires tax levy. You should not just enter all of your taxes as the 1110 current year taxes. So just a quick thing that we've gotten several questions on so far. So I thought I would cover that quickly before we dive into budget. By enrollment. Okay, we're going to skip step 8 for just a second because step 9 is basically a companion step to step 7. So we'll come back to step 8 in a moment. Step 9 is ESSA LE per pupil expenditure reporting. So again, navigate under data entry, TFS, and step 9. Okay, so you'll notice that there are only 3 funds available for selection in this step. There are 3 funds that have shared expenditures, meaning that you can have expenditures in these funds that are not for your school district. So that would be your school food services fund 12, miscellaneous programs fund 15, and your interlocal agreement fund 82. You're going to use this step if you have expenditures that you've made that are on behalf of another legal entity or another school district. Okay. This can be uploaded. So again, you have the option to upload. The same rules apply as do the other upload instructions. So you have a template out there in the whatever in the correct format, and that gets uploaded here to the additional expenditures. Or you can hand enter these expenditures. Make sure that you assign a legal entity and a school code where possible. If you have an agreement that does not involve a legal entity, so maybe you have a cooperative agreement with your county, you want to leave that legal entity and your school code blank, because that means it's a non-school entity. Assigning that to a legal entity allows that expenditure to be included in their ESSA per pupil reporting. So if you fail to enter a legal entity, you're not correctly assigning that expenditure where it should be assigned. The other thing that kind of trips folks up a little bit is if they're in step 7, they'll try to assign the totality of their expenditures to their school codes. If you do not leave an amount blank, that amount will not be available for entry in step 9. So for example, if you're running a school food fund, you want to make sure that you leave your expenditures for the LE that is not yours without a school code in step 7. Then you will go into step 9 and you'll enter at least a portion of that amount into step 9 and assign it to the other school code. If you don't have a blank amount in step 7, you will get a validation error. Okay, so what do we do with all of this ESSA per pupil information? Why are we collecting this? So the important thing to note here is that this is a federal report. This is not a state report. It's not something that OPI school finance made up to torture you, we promise. This is part of your federal reporting, and it incorporates a lot of information other than school finance information. So if you go under leadership, go all the way over there to the left, you're going to find your ESSA per pupil report card information over there. So this is what the report cards look like. You can select the school year and you can select the legal entity. Make sure you go all the way over there to the right. Sometimes it cuts off on the page, and click view report. You're going to see that there's a lot more information on here other than just your ESSA per pupil. So it's going to have assessment information, it's going to have enrollment, graduation information, etc. And then down at the very bottom will be your ESSA per pupil reporting. So how can you see what is going to be on that report card? It's very important, again, that you review this information before you submit your TFS. It's separately located. So if you go under data entry, go down to the very bottom, ESSA per pupil expenditure, you want to click that because that's going to show you what's on your report card. Very important to note that this report card has 2 pages. So you want to click the arrow there to get to page 2, because what's at the bottom of page 2 is what's going to show as your per pupil expenditure. The other thing to note is that you can download your ESSA per pupil report. So if you want to view it in Excel or PDF, you will have those options. You want to look at the bottom because it's going to give you the amount per school code. If there is a huge discrepancy between your school codes, you need to go back and you need to look at your expenditures in step 7. So if you have 10,000 for the elementary and 40,000 for the middle school, go back and check your expenditure allocations. The biggest expenditure in any school district is teacher salary. So again, make sure that you are allocating that teacher salary correctly and use your team's report to get the FTEs for each of those individuals. If you see something there that is an issue that you can't figure out how to explain it, there is a checkbox there and you can enter comments and you can hit save those comments, and then we'll be able to review whatever your issue is with your ESSA per pupil. A quick note, as we talked about a little bit with step 7, the new step 7A with reports number 2 and 3, there may be some slight fluctuation as other LEs and cooperatives enter their expenditures. So if you run this per pupil report before your cooperative enters their information, for example, it may look a little bit different than it does after they run their expenditures. So make sure that you just kind of check this a couple of times, check with your cooperatives or other LEs that you may have agreements with, and make sure that they've entered all of their information before you try to finalize what's in your report card. Okay, we're going to switch to detailed expenditures.
Yay. Detailed expenditures, step 8. I always loved when I got to this step. I don't know why. I felt like, okay, I'm in the home stretch. This was easy for me to enter in. To get there, you just do TFS and go to detailed expenditures. Okay, you're going to enter in detailed expenditures for all funds. And you go down to the program code, and these are the specific program codes that you need to enter in. You just select whichever one you're starting with and enter in the amount. What else do I need to do on here? Okay. Within the instructions, you'll have these step 8 detailed expenditure report. I want to bring you down to the bottom where it says refer to pages 21, 22, and 23 of the trustees financial summary instructions. It'll give you detailed coding that needs to be entered here. Pay close attention to your salaries with the different program codes. These need to be individually recorded.